The Lifestylist, episode 158, featuring Jeff Chilton.
I'm Luke Story, a former celebrity fashion stylist and founder of School of Style. For the past 20 years, I've been relentlessly dedicated to my deepest passion, designing the ultimate lifestyle based on the most powerful principles of health and spirituality. The Lifestylist Podcast is a show dedicated to sharing my discoveries and the experts behind them with you. This here episode of the Lifestylist Podcast is made possible in part by my friends over at onnit.com. I was recently out in Austin, went to their headquarters, recorded a couple podcasts, and these guys are doing it right, man. Their whole operation over there was just mind-blowing, from their gym to their corporate headquarters, just how the companies run. Now, I've been using their products for years. No doubt you've heard me talk about them. Things like Alpha Brain, which is their flagship nootropic. You may have even tried that yourself. But these guys are just growing and growing so fast, and their product line is just insane. It's all made with earth-grown nutrients, and it's all science-backed. They have a beautiful website over at onnit.com/Luke, by the way. And I don't know, I'm just really into it. I'm really stoked to work with these guys. I've been on a couple of their podcasts. A couple of those guys have been on mine, and we're becoming like family, man. So whether you're trying their energy bars, protein shakes, their krill oil, creatine, flavored MCT oils, which is one of my favorites. It's my little guilty pleasure is to make my coffees taste like those funky old coffee creamers that were really bad for you. Well, their version of it's really good for you. And their product New Mood is a really great one. I think that's my current favorite. And everything they do is just dope. They have, all kinds of fitness products and club bells and kettlebells and all that stuff. It's just madness over there. So head over to onnit.com/Luke and you will get 10% off all foods and supplements. And for a limited time at onnit.com/Luke, you'll get to receive a 14-count bottle of Alpha Brain to try for free. And once you try the Alpha Brain, you're going to be hooked. I'm just warning you. That stuff's going to light your brain up and make you a more badass athlete, fitness guru, entrepreneur, biohacker, whatever your thing is. Onnit can help you. onnit.com/Luke. People often ask me how I do all of the crazy stuff that I do, how I produce all these podcasts largely on my own and all the social media and video content, my fashion school. I'm a pretty high energy guy. I'm 47 years old, but it takes a lot to do everything that I do. So I'm, of course, a huge fan of supplements. And my favorite recent supplement, if you can even call it that, it's really more of a food, is by a company called Athletic Greens. So I reached out to them, said, hey, I love your stuff. I want to get you on the show. Sponsor me, help support the show. They're down, I'm down. And now I'm turning you on to something really new to me and awesome, although they've been around for quite some time. So Athletic Greens is a fantastic product. And because you listen to this show, if you're interested in trying it, you can get 20 free travel packs valued at $99 with your first purchase. Sounds pretty dope, right? So go to athleticgreens.com/Luke and hook yourself up. That's athleticgreens.com/Luke. You can live the dream like me, get all your superfoods in one scoop every day. It's fantastically easy and powerful. Check it out. What a long, strange trip it's been, folks. Here we are with another episode of the Lifestylist Podcast. Today's episode features Jeff Chilton, and we're talking about one thing and one thing only, my friend, and that is mushrooms, fungi, fungus, shrooms, tripping, spacing out. No, we're not spacing out that much. I was about to, though. I recorded this out at Paleo FX in Austin, Texas, out sitting on the lawn near a little lake with Jeff, and we did a full-on trip through the history of mushrooms. This is going to be an insane episode. I've been dying to put this one out because I love mushrooms, man. Back in the day, I used to trip balls on the regular, as you'll hear in this episode. So I love mushrooms just for fun, or used to. microdosing now every once in a while. I mean, very micro, like not getting high, kind of past that phase in life. But they do have their place, as you're going to find. And then for many, many years, I've been using Chinese herb-style medicinal mushrooms. So your chaga, your reishi, lion's mane, cordyceps, all of that kind of stuff. And Jeff is just the OG. So I'm stoked to finally be giving you like the Bible of mushrooms. I think this is just the be-all, end-all. We're just going to put a cork in the whole mushroom conversation because everything you need to know is here. But before I do, you know how I do. I've always got a couple announcements. I have some events, man. One of them is tomorrow night, goddammit, August 22nd. I'll be speaking at Next Health in Century City, and I'm going to be talking about biohacking the city using nature, how to survive in the city. It's kind of a piggyback on last week's show about EMFs. You know, how do we get in alignment with nature and thrive physically, mentally, emotionally, physically, in all those ways. I think I just said physically twice because I'm not thriving mentally. What? I need to go have some cordyceps. But anyway, come see me tomorrow at Next Health, August 22nd. Yes. And then the next night, August 23rd, I'll be out at one of my favorite biohacking spots in LA called OsteoStrong. This is where I spend every week. Once a week, I go out there and I build bone density. I've gained 40% in strength in like 9 sessions at OsteoStrong. It is bananas. Come see me speak there about all things consciousness. That's in 2 days, August 23rd. Then I'll be at Mercado Sagrado, the coolest festival in the goddamn world, October 13th and 14th in Malibu Canyon. Then I'll fly out to New York for Whitma Live. Can't wait for that. Super lit situation. That's October 25th. And then I'll be doing a special workshop at Rama Institute in New York City, October 27th, in celebration of my birthday. That's going to be a huge Scorpio consciousness download festival over there. Rama, October 27th. Okay, on to the guest. Jeff Chilton studied ethnomycology at the University of Washington in the late 60s and started working on a commercial mushroom farm in Olympia, Washington in 1973. When I was 3 years old, y'all. This dude's an OG in the mushroom game. He co-authored the highly acclaimed book, The Mushroom Cultivator. In 1989, he started Nammex, a business that introduced medicinal mushrooms to the U.S. nutritional supplement industry. Here's what we talk about in this extensive conversation. Overseeing the growth of 2,000 mushroom crops over the course of a decade. That's 40,000 pounds of mushrooms altogether, yo. Oh, wait, no, I read that wrong. That's 40 million pounds of mushrooms altogether. Dude knows his stuff. Starting the United States' first mushroom conferences, the world governments that have made plants illegal, how our education system shuts down the human mind and creativity, the importance of set and setting with psychedelic experiences, surreal microdosing experiences, and how microdosing relates to McKenna's stoned ape theory of human evolution. China actually began cultivating mushrooms as far back as the 12th century. The economics of commercial mushroom cultivation versus medicinal supplement production. What can go wrong while growing organic mushrooms? What makes each species of mushroom unique? There's thousands of species of mushrooms in the world, but we can only cultivate 25 of them. How some of the most popular medicinal mushrooms, cordyceps, reishi, chaga, and lion's mane, are used to heal the body. What makes them work? Why reishi is the Mac Daddy of all adaptogenic mushrooms, and if you're only going to take one, this would be the one. And then finally, why Jeff bought a professional Geiger counter after Fukushima, and the extraction methods that different producers use for different medicinal mushrooms. So as you can see, man, this episode is going to give you everything you could possibly ever want to know about all different types of mushrooms. That's what's fun about it. I've heard a few podcasts that other people have done, and it's been all about psychedelic mushrooms or all about the Chinese herbs. But in this one, we really cover the history of human use of mushrooms and why we still want to have them in our lives today. So it's going to be awesome. Before we jump into this Shroom Fest, I want to invite you to join me on Tuesday for my next episode. It's a very special one with Candice Kumai, Wabi Sabi Wellness, the Japanese art of perfectly imperfect living, number 159. That's next Tuesday. I don't want you to miss that show because it would just be a crime against humanity if you did. So please subscribe to this podcast on whatever device you are listening to my voice on right now. All right, so next week, Candice Kumai, number 159. But right now, I want to get some mushrooms into your head. So please Join me on this journey with Jeff Chilton. Jeff, good to see you again. Welcome to the show, dude.
Luke, pleasure to be here.
So you guys listening, we are sitting outdoors in downtown lovely Austin, Texas. This might be the first one I've ever recorded on location outdoors. So I'm really excited about this. We're looking at a body of water. We've got a Texas flag, an American flag flying high, which I always love, barefoot on the ground, and doesn't seem like there's a lot of wind, so the sound should be good. I just want to apologize ahead of time if you occasionally hear a, it's the price you got to pay as a listener to allow us to get some natural sun. So here we go, dude. We're going to be talking about your life as a mushroom grower, seller, connoisseur, user, because it's something that's becoming, thankfully for you, I'm sure, quite popular now. So how did you get into the business of Chinese herbs, medicinal mushrooms, and all this to begin with?
Well, I was born in Pacific Northwest, very green because there's lots of water, lots of forests, lots of mushrooms. So they're around me the whole time. And it's kind of interesting because I was raised in Seattle, but at one point we moved to Phoenix, Arizona. And when I was in Phoenix, Arizona in high school, a friend of mine went to Mexico. And he came back from Mexico. He went to summer school in Mexico. And I was like, oh, man, that sounds so cool. He comes back and he says, dude, when I was down there, I was introduced to these things called magic mushrooms. And I was just like, magic mushrooms? That is just incredible. And for me, I'm the 50s was all of these kind of Walt Disney cool, Treasure Island, and all of these stories, and magic mushrooms just resonated with me so much. And then we moved back to Seattle, and I went to university there. And what was happening then, of course, we're talking about the 60s, and magic mushrooms were kind of a big thing at that point. And they were growing. We found they were growing right there. And that became part of my study at university. I studied some mycology, but my actual real study was anthropology and how are mushrooms used in cultures worldwide. And part of that use was shamanism. So I'm studying this in university. In fact, there were some books about mushroom use that I had to go to the rare book room in the university and sign in to get these books to be able to read them. So that's kind of like where it all began for me. And then after university, I'm like, what am I going to do with a degree in anthropology? Well, not too much. But I went to my mycology professor, and at that point I thought, well, growing mushrooms would be really cool. And he says, hey, there's a mushroom farm 60 miles down the road. Go down there and talk to the owner, and you might get a job.
Were they growing like culinary mushrooms?
They're growing the button mushroom.
Oh, okay.
It's a big farm. They're growing this, and I'm just like, man, that just sounds so cool, growing mushrooms. I go down there, I interview. A few days later, he calls me up and says, hey, you got a job. Come on down. I was just like, I was ecstatic.
What year would have this been?
That was 1973.
Oh, wow. I was 3 years old.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
You're getting into the mushroom game.
And I had just come back from spending a year and a half in Mexico, just kind of bumming around Mexico and actually going back to the mountains, looking for magic mushrooms and things. And now I'm back. I'm jobless. I'm living in my father's basement.
When you were down in Mexico, I'm assuming your search was successful and you were able to find psilocybin mushrooms down there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What about peyote? Was that part of the thing?
Well, I did encounter peyote down there too, but my real search was for the magic mushrooms. And you know what?
Did the indigenous people in the countryside down there partake? Was that part of the culture?
That's actually where I was. I was out in the country. I was back in the mountains, and yeah, that's what was going on. The indigenous people there, but remember, they were mostly used in healing ceremonies. So these were curanderas. These were native healers, and this history down there. That was the cool thing about it, is that this rare book I was talking to you about, there was a New York banker who went down to Mexico in the 50s. He was doing a big study on mushrooms worldwide. He heard about psilocybe mushroom still being used in Mexico. He went down with a French mycologist. They spent the next 5 summers down there. And because summer's the rainy season. That's when the mushrooms grow.
Interesting.
And here's the thing that's so interesting about it, Luke, is that back then, they wrote up a big article with photos and drawings in what was called Life magazine.
I remember Life magazine. Yeah.
It was a big, just mainstream magazine. And on the cover, they said, amazing discoveries, mushrooms that cause vision discovered.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
Wow.
Can you imagine that? Like if it was some mainstream publication doing that in the 70s or 80s or 90s, big discovery.
At this point, had psilocybin mushrooms become illegal and classified as a Schedule 1 substance along with all of the hard drugs and stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
okay.
that all came because one of the things Timothy Leary actually got wind of this, and before he really started up his studies, he went down to Mexico, and some of his first trips were with psilocybe mushrooms.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So it was one of these discoveries that had been literally hidden in the mountains of Mexico for hundreds and hundreds of years, because when the Spaniards came down to Mexico, they saw this as blasphemy, because the natives down there called these mushrooms God's flesh.
Wow. Wow.
Can you imagine? God's flesh.
I would think that's a pretty true statement, actually. I can see why. So the natives down there, the indigenous Mexican people living out in the hills, to them this is a sacred ritual, as you said, for healing. So they're not like out partying at a prehistoric rave, like just doing it to get high for no purpose. In other words, their motive was some sort of healing or ascension then.
Absolutely. Pretty much that was going on. But I'll tell you what happened is that after the word got out about this going on down in Mexico, you had a flood of people from North America going down after the mushrooms. So I knew lots of people that were doing this in the late 60s. And at one point, it got so bad because what you did, you had people walking around in these villages back in the mountains stoned. And they were tripping out.
The locals must have been like, what is happening here? What are all these high gringos doing?
Were not happy. And the other thing that goes on in these types of situations is all of a sudden what was a sacred plant becomes a commodity that people are buying and selling.
Right.
And that starts to change the dynamic in these small communities.
So at what point did the Americans realize that you can just go out and find a cow pasture in Washington or Oregon or any number of places and find mushrooms there? You don't actually have to go to Mexico. I mean, it's the same.
Well, this is the interesting part about it, is because then right in the early 70s, somebody in the States wrote a small little book called something like The American Psilocybin Mushroom, and he had watercolors of all these different psilocybe mushrooms that were growing all around the U.S., Gulf Coast, Washington, Oregon. So the next thing you know, people discovered that, hey, we don't have to go to Mexico. The other thing that happened too was that down in Mexico, they literally sealed off this area in the mountains. They put the army at all the roads and all the ways to get in there. And they went in, they rounded up everybody and deported them. And then for the next 10 years, nobody could get back in there unless you snuck back in.
Wow.
Yeah. It was that crazy.
And what was the motive of the Mexican government? Was it to preserve the culture or the land and not have it inundated with a bunch of high white people walking around? Or were they not wanting anyone to take these mushrooms like the U.S. government eventually did?
They were also, they're completely hooked up with the U.S. government.
Okay.
So it was like, oh, the hippies have invaded and they're taking all of these crazy drugs. We've got to stop it.
Right.
And plus it was pretty disruptive. So it was not very respectful of the local culture. And that was the big problem for a lot of, including myself. I thought it was pretty disrespectful. So when I was up there later in the early 70s, everything had really kind of chilled out a little bit. But ultimately, realizing that they were actually in the Northwest. We could go out and find them. And at this point in time in 1973, I'm going to work on a mushroom farm.
Right.
I'm learning how to grow mushrooms.
So at what point did people, or did they ever, because I don't know if this ever really caught on, is, making your own little lab and growing your own mushrooms, magic mushrooms. Because I remember being a kid in the 70s, and I got into drugs in the late 70s when I was still a kid.
Yeah.
For better or for worse. And I remember there was these, they weren't websites, obviously, because there was no internet, but you could get a hold of spores and make a little kit in your bedroom and grow your own mushrooms. But it never really caught on like growing marijuana, for example. In Northern California in the 70s, I mean, everyone grew weed. There's weed farms everywhere. It's just part of the culture. But the growing your own mushrooms things never really seemed to catch. I never knew anyone that successfully did it. But I knew a lot of people that grew weed outdoors and indoors with lighting systems and things like that through the 70s and into the 80s. Did growing your own mushrooms ever become easy and feasible? And if someone wanted to scale and, kind of produce a crop of magic mushrooms?
Oh, man, yeah.
You did?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Okay. So here's how it evolved.
Because I used to sell mushrooms in the 90s, and I think I don't know if they were grown in a lab or someone's home, farm, or if they were collected from cow pies out in Oregon or something. I never could figure out where they came from. But I used to get 5-pound bags of shrooms and sell them,
Oh, yeah, of course. And so what's happening now is all through the 70s, people in the Northwest are out. They're walking through pastures where you can find a lot of these really small little psilocybe mushrooms.
Right. What do you call them? Psilocybe?
Psilocybe is the actual genus.
Okay.
Yeah, so you could call them psilocybin mushrooms.
Okay.
But psilocybe is the genus, the botanical name, psilocybe.
And how many different varieties of those are there?
Well, there's probably, worldwide there's hundreds of species.
Okay.
But in the United States, maybe there's, 12, 15, 20 different species and maybe half a dozen major species.
Okay.
Some ones that you can go out and find, and they're powerful and you can eat them. Mm-hmm. But what went on is through the 70s, there were people combing the pastures. There were people. So you'd drive down the roads in Washington and Oregon, and you look out, and there'd be these people slowly walking through the pastures with their eyes on the ground. And ultimately, it got to the point where police were called oftentimes, by a farmer or somebody, get these people out of my field.
I can imagine these old-timey, country folk farmers out there going, what the hell are these long-haired naked hippies doing out in my field all of a sudden? That must have been a shock to them, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just watched this documentary called Wild, Wild Country about Osho and his ashram in the woods up in Oregon, you know, and just seeing, and this is I guess, late 70s, early 80s, and to see how the local townspeople that are just very simple people, that just kind of live off the land and they're farmers, and all these hippies in orange robes come into town, and they're just they feel like an alien invasion is happening,
Well, absolutely. And it was an alien invasion in every sense of the word, in terms of a new culture coming in and implanting itself right there in a place that had been the same for many years. So, that was the whole counterculture, was an alien culture.
Right.
This was something that was rejecting a lot of the mainstream values, going off, and in a lot of cases we were exploring areas of the mind that hadn't been looked at in our culture for maybe hundreds of years.
Right.
So this was a whole new thing.
So in terms of people then starting to experiment with magic mushrooms and LSD and, the psychedelics and all that, like Ram Dass and Timothy Leary and all these guys, at what point did you observe that culture then starting to take on cocaine and heroin and all the drugs that really don't have any inherent value other than destroying your life eventually? Was there two sects of people at that point? Like people that were more into marijuana, mushrooms, things like that, and then the other people that went into the hard street drugs? Or did a lot of people that had more of a holistic spiritual intention with psychedelics kind of end up getting caught in the wave of the harder drugs?
Well, you know what? There was some of that, but I would say generally it was two different paths.
Right.
And, getting back to what was going on with mushrooms in the 70s, what happened is, I spent the next 10 years growing mushrooms. That essentially is my profession as a mushroom grower. And I literally lived with mushrooms for 10 years. And the cool thing was on this farm, and everything's grown indoors.
And these are legit, like culinary mushrooms.
These are
like
culinary
you're saying,
mushrooms.
right.
I mean, these are the mushrooms that you get in the supermarket.
This is an agricultural model,
Absolutely.
right? Okay.
And we're making every week on this farm, because it's a big farm, we're bringing in 4 new crops every week, and 4 crops are being taken out and dumped. So it's a 90-day, what we would call cropping cycle. So I'm seeing literally 4 crops a week, times 50 weeks. That's 200 crops a year, times 10 years. I've seen 2,000 individual mushroom crops in 10 years. 2,000. I think of a farmer seeing what, 50 crops in a lifetime.
Right.
And each one of these crops is producing approximately 20,000 pounds of fresh mushrooms. We're producing over 2 million pounds of fresh button mushrooms. And while I was there was a Japanese scientist who was working there, and he was growing shiitake, oyster mushroom, and enoki mushroom. So during the 70s, I had a view of these other mushrooms being grown. So I was learning about how to grow these other mushrooms at the same time. And of course, in the late 70s, there was a lot of conferences going on about this whole history of like how this guy came across these magic mushrooms that were in the mountains. Harvard botanists that came in, Albert Hofmann and LSD. These conferences were going on. Well, with a group of 3 other people, we started mushroom conferences in Washington and Oregon. So in 79, 80, 81, and 80, we had 4 major mushroom conferences where we brought in people. Andrew Weil was one of our speakers at a lot of these. And these conferences were dealing with not just mushroom identification. So we're kind of like teaching people about identification. We're also teaching people about mushroom cultivation, which was my forte at the time. So that was my role in these conferences. The very last conference we had, our keynote speaker was Terence Mckenna.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, 1982.
Wow.
Yeah, he was our keynote at that one.
So there's kind of a crossover then with the culinary mushrooms, the food mushrooms, and then some of those, as the shiitake and some of these other strains of mushrooms, varieties of mushrooms also are now beginning to have health benefits. And then that's crossing over with the mind and consciousness expanding. So the mushroom thing then at this point is kind of turning into a movement of sorts.
Yeah, it is. And to just kind of close this chapter a little bit, what happened was that in 1976, 1977, there's a couple of small little books that came out on how to grow psilocybe mushrooms.
Okay,
one of those books was written by Terence and Dennis McKenna.
Oh, interesting.
Okay, and then
one of them's here. Aren't
Dennis
they?
is here.
Yeah, that's right. Oh man,
Dennis
I got to
is here.
track him down.
Yeah. He's going to be on tonight. And so, in 1983, I co-authored a book called The Mushroom Cultivator. And it was a 400-page book. It had total instructions on how to grow mushrooms at home in a small setting. Well, and so what happened was all of a sudden, people, rather than going out and hunting these things in the pastures and all of that, cultivation came in. And for the first time, these mushrooms were being grown on a large scale. People didn't have to go hunting them. And so really, instead of, in a lot of cases, when you're doing some kind of a psychoactive plant or something, you're just taking a little pill. You didn't know what was in it. Now you had actual mushrooms. You could look at them. You could see them. These are real mushrooms. So literally by the 80s, cultivated mushrooms were everywhere.
Interesting.
And the number of people
now...
So
I wonder then in the early 90s when I was buying them off My Connect, I mean...
They were all being cultivated.
Probably were, yeah.
Absolutely. And that was the big change. All of a sudden, people could do it at home and do it very, very successfully. I mean, right now, Luke, in the world today, there are millions and millions of pounds of psilocybin mushrooms being produced. Absolutely.
Interesting.
Millions of pounds.
Wow. I think that's a good thing. It's funny. I'm thinking back to the story of these the indigenous people in Mexico, growing collecting these mushrooms, foraging these mushrooms, having ceremony around that. And then at some point, not only there, but just throughout the world, the governments, as they've come into power, as an end result of the agricultural system and land ownership and all that stuff, which is a whole other show. That the powers that be, for various reasons, to me, I think they just collectively don't want the common people waking up and becoming
I totally
conscious.
agree.
They've made plants illegal. I just find that such a weird thing.
They've made plants illegal.
So if there was a psilocybin mushroom growing behind us here in a cow patty, if I pick it off the ground in the state of Texas, I'm assuming it's a felony here, they can throw me in jail for just possessing something that God or creation has put on earth. I just find that to be so weird.
Absolutely. Well, especially a plant, for God's
that's
sakes.
what I'm saying. I mean, something that's been processed from a plant, sure. Heroin, cocaine.
Yes.
Heroin is much different than an opium poppy. As
right.
Cocaine, the end product, is much different than a cocoa leaf. I mean, I get that. Okay, sure.
Yeah.
You're going to take plants and make a potentially deadly compound of it. Yeah, maybe some intervention there, but still not.
Still not, yeah.
But a plant, or I guess a fungi is not technically a plant. It's its own species, but I just find that to be so wrong on so many levels, So even though I don't personally participate in, I sometimes will microdose on psilocybin or something, which we can get into, but I don't take any kind of drug to get high, plant or otherwise at this point in my life. It's just not part of the journey, but I'm still such an advocate for freedom of people to use whatever nature provides at their own risk.
I am too. 100%.
It just irks me.
And listen, here's one of the things about when you can all of a sudden give people the power to actually cultivate these things themselves. It's just like people that used to have to go to Mexico to smoke pot or something, right? And now they can grow it back here, let's say in their garden, whatever, have a few plants. They've got full control of that. They don't have to be out there, am I going to get busted by buying it from some person or whatever. So really, the fact that for the first time, people could actually grow these mushrooms, small amounts at home. The fact, however they do it was a really good thing. Not only did they no longer go to Mexico, and the funny thing is these villages in Mexico that at one point in time were flooded with people looking for these mushrooms. I went back in 2002 to this one village that was the place. There were 3 Mexican hippies in town and 1 American filmmaker. That was it.
Wow.
There was nobody there. And not only that, they had a mushroom festival every summer during the rainy season. And the woman who was the curandera that became very famous from that area, her name was Maria Sabina. She was now a patron saint.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
And they looked at her in a totally different way from someone, some other culture might look at her.
Right.
She was a curandera. She used these things to heal people. She was literally sainted down there. And now they're having mushroom festivals. And yet, even with the mushroom festival there, nobody in North America probably even knows about them.
Right.
And nobody even thinks about it because it's like, oh yeah, if I want mushrooms, I just go down here and I buy them from so-and-so and everything's cool. Or I grow them at home. Yeah. And that was certainly one of the things that my book that was written, again, that I co-authored in 1983, helped people do.
That's cool.
As well as growing edible mushrooms as well, because there's edible mushrooms, but you could also use the same techniques to grow psilocybe mushrooms.
So with the psilocybe,
B.
like psilocybin.
Yeah.
Okay, psilocybe. Psilocybe, that's a hard word to say. Mushrooms. At what point in your own personal life, has the, I don't want to say recreational use, but say sacramental use of those mushrooms in your life, is that something you did in the past and don't do anymore? Or do you periodically take trips for your own purposes still at this point?
I still do, but in a more limited way.
Okay.
You know what? I've had a lot of doors opened, and I've seen a lot of things that I cherish those experiences because they've shown me, let's just say, they've shown me areas, spaces, dimensions that allowed me to realize that there's a lot more than what we're seeing right here, that part of our education is to close us down to where our senses and our mind and everything is closed down to what our culture wants us to focus on. So visually or auditorily,
which is becoming a tax paying producer.
This is all stuff that, they don't want us to experience this other thing because really those experiences in the very beginning, back in prehistory, that was immediate experience with the Godhead. That was experiencing the world, or let's say this universe as it really is. The churches, once they organized and they got away from that, they didn't want us to have that experience anymore. They absolutely didn't. They closed it right down, just like they closed it down back in the 60s when it was reemerging. So really, those experiences for me were seminal in how I view the world. There's something that opened my eyes, like they opened the eyes of a lot of people, and it was very, very important. And I think people should all, especially people who are ready, should have it. But of course, you always need to do it in the right place, with the right mind space, and that's called set and setting. And that's very, very important.
I wish I had known that when I was 16.
well, yeah.
I had a lot of psychedelic experiences that were not.
Well, Luke,
optimal.
The 60s was full of that, because we were not given a framework on how to utilize these things. And that's why a lot of people wanted to go off to Mexico and these places. That's why a lot of people now go to South America to be in some session with an ayahuasquero or something. And a lot of those are not valid. Some are. You have to be very careful. But to me, it's like, look, either do it alone in your own personal space or do it with friends in a safe space. Have somebody there that's going to answer the phone and answer the door.
Sure.
Because you don't want to do that.
Some of my first experiences would have been like at a Motley Crue concert.
Well, exactly.
I think I remember one of the hardest acid trips I ever had was, it could have been cool, but it's just, acid just lasts too long. But I went to the Pink Floyd laser show in Golden Gate Park.
Oh, yeah.
This was, mid 80s or something, probably 86, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
We had a great idea. Cool. Let's go listen to Dark Side of the Moon, to this laser light show. I mean, God, what a great thing to do on acid, right? Well, the thing is, the light show, we didn't realize it's about 45 minutes long, So take the acid, start to come on. It's amazing. And then they turn the lights on. They're like, bye, folks.
And you're like,
and now we have to drive through San Francisco, which is a difficult town to drive around a car sober.
Of course it is, yes.
All the, one-way streets and all those hills and stuff. So now I'm like frying balls trying to navigate my way out of San Francisco while the street signs are melting before my eyes. It was a horrifying experience,
Absolutely.
It's one of those things, and then you're like, 10 hours later, you're still tripping.
Yeah.
So, set and setting are really important. Even though my intention was not, I'm going to take acid and meditate and find God or something. It was like, hey, I just want to see some weird shit.
Well, yeah. And you know what? I'm not opposed to that either, because in the right setting too, I think, as a celebration, it can also be used in a celebration in the right setting. So I'm not one of those, you've got to be in a church to do this, right?
Yeah.
No, I'm not that way at all, because I think there's a place for both. But there are definitely times where you don't want to be doing it, and situations where you don't want to be high on one of those plants. And they can teach you a lot. You can learn a lot from them. You absolutely can. But going back to sort of where I ended up was that all through the 80s, I read more about medicinal mushrooms.
Right.
And I'd known about medicinal mushrooms in the 70s as I was a mushroom grower.
It's interesting.
And all.
I can tell you've played with some plants because you intuitively know where I want to go next. You're tuned in, because I was like, I do want to cover the psychoactive element, but we have some medicinal mushrooms in front of us. You're now a purveyor of them, and that's a huge part of my life.
Yeah.
But actually, before we go into that, I do want to touch on one more thing so that I don't forget, and that is this concept of microdosing with the psychoactive mushrooms. As I said, it's something I've experimented with very cautiously lately, because I'm not at a place in my life where I want to trip, just...
Sure,
been there, done that.
Yeah.
I feel I've seen through those windows in the house.
Yeah.
And I'm cool.
Yep.
I live in that house as much as I can, totally sober.
Yep.
But I have done a fair amount of research about this idea of microdosing with psychoactive mushrooms, which to me would mean taking around 1/10 of a gram, which is like nowhere near enough to get any adult human what you'd consider high.
Correct.
And so I've done a little bit of that and haven't really noticed anything other than, because I've only done it a few times. I haven't done an extended trial where I'm doing it for 3 months or something like that. But what I have noticed is my vision improves on those days.
Oh,
Because
interesting.
I'm a little bit, what do they call it? Nearsighted, I think. So far away gets a little blurry.
Uh-huh.
And I had an experience recently where I started feeling a little bit strange. Not high, but just like a little uncomfortable. So I went outside and I was like, oh God, I hope I'm not tripping. Took a moment, closed my eyes. I was like, I'm not tripping, but I definitely started to tickle the consciousness ever so slightly.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like, I don't like this feeling. And I kind of breathed through it. And then I opened my eyes and I was in my car, just took a breather. And I opened my eyes and I was like, holy shit, I can see that street sign across the street, which there's no way I would be able to read that sign normally.
That is so awesome. Yeah. And you know where that fits in too, is that fits into Terence Mckenna's whole, one of the things that he was conjecturing, which was early on in our development, back in time, the stoned ape is sort of his thing, where we started to ingest these things. And what did it do? It gave us some visual acuity, allowed us to hear a little more. These are survival skills. These are things that help us survive. So he was postulating not only that also that drove our mental capabilities in a certain way too, and helped to bring that on. But you can imagine if you're a hunter, visual acuity. If you're a hunter, your hearing is a little bit more in tune. Oh man, these are going to help you out a lot. So yeah, and microdosing. You know what? I think microdosing is kind of cool. 100 milligrams is a very small amount. You're definitely
that's a 1/10 of a gram.
Right? 1/10 of a gram. You're barely going to scratch the surface with that.
Which for people listening, if you were to grind that up in a coffee maker, which I would recommend, is to standardize it so you're getting caps and stems in equal measure, so that you can actually measure the dose. That would be one regular vitamin-sized capsule. Right? I didn't put mine in a capsule. And I think the one day that I felt a little funky, not high, but just I'm so sober for so long that any little micro weird feeling, I'm like, I notice it. So I noticed a little feeling. But that day, I didn't grind it up and I didn't standardize it. So I might have just eaten a tiny little stem that was still 1/10 of a gram, but it might have been stronger than the other little cap or the other little stem.
Or you never know. It might. You know what? Sometimes what it is that your body on that day is in a different place.
Oh, interesting.
I didn't think about that. It's like the food or anything. You're in a different, your body's different that day than the other days, and you are just a little bit more sensitive. You do, and you should start at a small level, 100 milligrams, like you're talking about, 1/10 of a gram. See if that has any effect on you. If it doesn't, then to really get the benefits, do it in a regular way over a period of time. And what I was saying too is that with these types of plants and with these types of compounds, you can build up a tolerance to them. So if you're taking higher doses of these things, normally if you take that like a couple times a week, by the third or fourth time, you're not really getting very high on them. So you can build up a tolerance, which is interesting when it comes to the microdosing thing. And I don't know whether if you were to microdose at a certain level, you'd reach a point where, okay, I've got this great point, or whether you'd just go, you know what, all of a sudden I'm not getting any benefits. So that's the other possibility here. And that's something that I'd love to talk to Terence Mckenna about, because he would probably be able to address that.
Yeah,
because
you really do build up a tolerance, though, because back in the day when I was selling mushrooms as an illicit drug, I would take, maybe when I start out, you'd take a couple grams and get pretty high. Then over the years of periodically taking them and having access to pounds of them, I'd take like a 1/4 ounce. And I'd get high, for sure. But it's like I kind of had to do more and more over the years to achieve
that could be
that same place.
And it's like a lot of herbs. I mean, with a lot of herbalists will tell you, if you're taking a certain herb, stop it after a certain period of time, and then give your body a chance to rest and sort of recalibrate.
To kind of cycle the herbs.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's Oh, one last thing actually on the microdosing is I've heard some stuff. I think it was Paul Stamets that I heard on Joe Rogan's show, and he talked all about all things mushrooms, of course. But one of the things he highlighted with the microdosing is the synergistic relationship with lion's mane, particularly, and cubensis, psychoactive mushrooms. Have you heard anything about enhancing, the different types, the properties of the different types of mushrooms like that?
Well, you know what? In terms of a synergy between different mushrooms, there's very little science on that at this point in time. Everything I would say on that subject is going to be anecdotal.
Okay.
So if somebody has that experience, and then great, report it and tell it, and we can discuss it, and other people can try it and find out. But that's purely anecdotal at this point in time. I don't think there's anything that really would support that in a scientific way.
Cool.
And some people are speculating a lot out there, and that's great. People can speculate on all sorts of things.
I mean, the fact of the matter is, it's not going to hurt you to try it.
No, absolutely not.
It's like there's poisonous mushrooms, then there's mushrooms that aren't,
That's right.
poisonous that could kill you or hurt you.
Yeah.
And there's the non-poisonous, medicinal, and edible mushrooms, and mix and match them as you please, and there doesn't seem to be any.
That's absolutely right. I mean, you can, like with medicinal mushrooms, you can blend a number. In fact, one of the products we sell has 5 different mushrooms together. What I would say is that there are some products out there that have, and we can get into this a little bit later, have like 16 and 20 and 24. And it's like, the products out there that are like kitchen sink products. Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, the more of them we put in here, the better. Actually, it's the opposite, because what happens is that you end up putting in mushrooms with much lower value, and you're at the same time lowering the amount of the really good ones.
Right,
so you end up with a product that's actually not as good.
That's funny. I find that a lot with just a lot of the green powders and just the different superfoods, and there'll be like 150 ingredients, but that's serving dose is a tablespoon. I'm thinking, how much spirulina is actually in in a tablespoon if there's 150 other things competing with that, milligrams. So anyway.
You have to be very careful with those products. Absolutely.
So at what point then, let's jump back to, which is a great segue into when you started to discover the Chinese herbalism aspect of medicinal mushrooms, and let's go into a few of those and what some of the health benefits are and things like that.
In 1989, I made my first trip to China, and I went over for an international conference on mushrooms. So the International Mushroom Conference by the International Society for Mushroom Science in China. And this was like during a period when China is just opening up, and this was the very first international conference in China. So I'm going over to that in 1989.
God, that must have been a trip.
Oh, man, it was. I never in my wildest dreams thought I would have anything to do with China in my life.
Right.
And it turns out I'm totally connected now. So that was the first time I met so many people at that conference. And all through the 90s, I traveled through China, because what I realized, and this is something that's really important, is that as a mushroom grower, I can grow mushrooms in North America and sell them as food. And I can sell you that fresh shiitake for $5 a pound. As a supplement, now I'm selling a dried powder, so I have to dry that shiitake out. Well, a shiitake mushroom, and all mushrooms are 90% water. Now that $5, I have to get $50 for that same pound.
Right.
I sell stuff in kilos. Now that would be like over $100 for a kilo of shiitake mushrooms as a dried powder. Economically, it does not work for a nutritional supplement.
Sure.
Okay. I realized that in the 90s, and I went, okay, China is the place. And, China, man, I tell you, Luke, it has got thousands of years of history there. It is an unbelievable place. And it is where mushroom growing began. In the 12th century, they learned how to grow shiitake mushrooms.
Wow.
The 12th century. In fact, what's
That's
really
crazy.
cool is that at this mushroom conference, we're back in the mountains of China, and we're in the shiitake growing Mecca, the heartland of shiitake growing in China. And nearby is a Buddhist temple, And it's dedicated to the man who first introduced shiitake growing to the other people in China. So you go into this temple, and they've got this dude sitting up in the front, a big statue of this guy, and in one open hand that he's got outstretched in his palm, he's got a shiitake mushroom. It's like the shiitake temple.
That's crazy, dude.
And it was just like, and it was just kind of like, it wasn't a big temple. It was, at this point in time, it's still kind of a funky little temple, but they took us there, and that's where the local people would go to kind of pay homage to this guy, and also to do kind of a Buddhist good luck thing there as well. Seeing that there and realizing that these people here know how to grow mushrooms. They are organized, and it is hundreds, thousands of small growers that are doing this. And the other cool thing is that they're growing mushrooms naturally, with not inside in rooms like when I used to grow them in huge cement rooms with air conditioning and heating and fresh air being pumped in and humidity control. They're growing them during the time of year when the temperatures are perfect for that mushroom. They're growing them in shade houses. And they're growing millions of pounds, of course, but shade houses, natural temperature, fresh air, natural light. Mushrooms need light. You've heard the joke of, oh yeah, they keep me in the dark like a mushroom and they feed me bullshit and stuff like that, right? Mushrooms actually need light to grow. The button mushroom that I used to grow indoors does not need light, but almost all other mushrooms need light to grow and mature properly. Otherwise, they'll grow in a kind of a weird way. But while I'm there in the 90s, I am going to scientific research institutes. I'm visiting processors. I'm visiting farms. I'm going to conference after conference. I'm making connections. I'm learning. I'm going to conferences where there are traditional Chinese medicine doctors there, and they're talking about their use of mushrooms. Still remember the one guy who was saying, reishi is my most powerful herb for the liver.
Wow.
And that's always stayed with me. And that's what some of the science has proved.
That makes sense because it's bitter.
Yes, exactly.
Oftentimes bitter herbs
those
are associated with
triterpenes, the bitter triterpenes in there. And science has demonstrated that. So I build up a lot of connections. And my business, I started my business in 1989, the same year that I went over to China, 1989. And I used to go to the Natural Foods Expo in Anaheim, which they have every year, and it's a big natural product show. In 1990-91, I was walking the floor of that with a reishi mushroom in my hand.
No way, really?
And I was going, have you ever heard of medicinal mushrooms? People look at me like, what are you talking about? And they look at this reishi I had, and they look and they go, is that just a piece of wood?
Which, by the way, we've got you guys listening to the podcast. This will be not meaningful to you, but I'm going to go ahead and show this on our Instagram and Facebook Live. That is a reishi mushroom right there. It's really fantastic. And it's interesting when you touch them. I have it in my hand, obviously, and they are really hard like wood.
They're
so
hard
it's not,
and woody.
It's not like a mushroom that you could just eat. I mean, it needs to go through an extraction process, which we'll talk about. But this is one of the strangest things. It looks like it's not made by nature. And just when you touch a reishi mushroom, it is such a trippy thing.
It's amazing.
It's like a wooden plant almost. It's just the weirdest thing. Anyway.
Yeah, and this of course is a dried reishi mushroom.
Right.
Okay, and classically too, the reishi mushroom will form like a ram's horn spiral design, which is that classic kind of sacred geometry.
Right.
And this one, they've allowed it to grow all the way together. So it's grown together, but it produces that like Archimedes circle. And it's just the most beautiful. And you see it all over in China in their art. You see it in their architecture. It is just this common motif. In fact, they've got another mushroom that's very similar to reishi that is they call it's turkey tail, and they call that the cloud fungus. because it kind of looks like a cloud in the way it grows. But so what I, here it is. I'm trying to introduce mushrooms into the nutritional supplement industry, and people are like, man, they're green plant people.
Right.
That's what they know. This is herbalism. This is Western herbalism, green plants. Fungi? No. They don't know anything about it. And there I am trying to sell to people at a trade show who are there to sell. So it's a hard sell. During the 90s, I produced all sorts of articles. I published books trying to educate people about it. And then in 1997, I went to China with OCIA, which is one of the top organic certifiers in the United States, and we did the very first organic certification workshop for mushrooms in China, 1997. And there was 24 people there.
We'll be right back at you after this brief but important announcement. Today's show is brought to you by Four Sigmatic. Now, you guys know I'm always talking about their medicinal mushroom elixirs because I take them all the time. I'm super addicted to them. But now they've got a couple other products that I'm really into. They've got a decaf coffee for when I don't feel like freaking out on caffeine. And then they have a regular coffee, but not just coffee. Both of them are infused with medicinal mushrooms. So it's a mushroom coffee. They're fantastic. They've also got some matcha drinks like the matcha with lion's mane. And the thing that's cool about the Four Sigmatic drinks is they're totally organic. They're super powerful herbs and superfoods and mushrooms, but they're really easy to use. That's the issue I've had, like trying to be healthy and making myself some cool drinks, is that it's kind of a pain in the ass and I have to open up all these different containers and it's a big project. Their products come in these little packets. You just pop them open. They're very portable. I take them on the plane. I take them on trips. I keep them in my bag, in my car. I kind of have them all over the house. And I can just use them whenever I want. So Four Sigmatic, one of my favorite companies. If you want to check them out, I highly recommend that you do. To do that, you go to foursigmatic.com. And like all of my sponsors, they offer a sweet discount to the listeners. If you use the code LukeStory, you will save 15% off your order, which is a pretty good deal. So go to foursigmatic.com, enter the code LukeStory, and save 15%. Check it out. And now, back to the interview. So what could go wrong for a mushroom grower that has a commercial operation that's not using pesticides? Would you have issues with bugs, or what would come in and interfere with your crop?
Well, yeah, absolutely. There are going to be bugs out there. If you got wild mushrooming and you find one of these choice edible mushrooms out there, there's a good chance that it could be bug riddled. And these would be like the larvae of these little flies and things. The flies will come in, they'll lay their eggs, the larvae will hatch, and then they will just literally worm their way through and chew this thing up. So yeah, like any monocrop, growing mushrooms is also susceptible to that. And it's also susceptible to other fungi that can attack the mushroom crop, that can attack the mycelium that is like in your substrate that's in that piece of wood or in that compost. They will attack that and chew on it as well.
So there's competition amongst the fungi.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, no. It's not like everybody's down underground holding hands.
So there's a war going on in the soil.
Well, you know what? And I don't like to talk about it in those terms because the way I look at it and the way I look at the world is we're all in this together. We're actually cooperating, but we're consuming the same things sometimes. Okay, well, you're taking what you can, I'm taking what I can, and we're kind of competing in a certain way. But no, we're not really at war because this is a very large ecosystem with lots of organisms here. So I look at it, maybe in the worst case, maybe we're struggling against something, because we can be struggling against microbial infections or something like that. But, the minute you start talking about war, all of a sudden it's like you're starting to tighten up. You're starting to get into a place where you're not a good healing space, right? So for me, that metaphor I don't like at all.
I like that.
I really don't. So
I like that.
The key thing though, Luke, is that after that workshop, within 3 years, I was getting certified organic mushrooms from my Chinese partners. And those mushrooms we were then also making into extracts. And I've been certified organic since 1992 in my business because
no one even knew what organic was at that
I
point.
totally believe in the organic ethic.
Right.
I mean, it's a major thing for me, and that's what I want to be. I don't want to be selling products that are full of chemicals.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
So when you have a commercial operation for medicinal mushrooms, how do you avoid, like, what do you do to protect your crop if you're not using chemicals and pesticides and all that kind of stuff, fungicides?
Well, you know what? A lot of it is just making sure there's no other items around that can possibly be hiding places for these things to propagate. You can do it just by the initial stages. The key is in those initial stages because mycelium is what we use as our seed. So that grows out in like the sawdust or the wood log. If we can keep that protected, so nothing gets in that initial stage of the cultivation cycle, by the time we put that out to get the mushroom started, the amount of time now is going to be much shorter. So there's a lot less time for these other things to get in. So a lot of it is your technique, how you're doing it, how clean your operation is. You don't have a lot of old spent bags laying around that are filled with bugs and stuff like that. So there are ways to do it. I mean, no different than what people have to do here in the United States for any organic crop. It really is. It's just a different technique, but it can be done. And we've gotten, our products. I'm just so proud of all of and we use hundreds of small growers that are organized by the people that we work with over there, and that then that organic mushroom comes to our processing facility. And these processing facilities, man, it's just like stainless steel everywhere. It's like we're extracting. So there's huge stainless steel vessels that the mushrooms get put into, and they get cooked 2, sometimes 3 times. Certain mushrooms like reishi or chaga will get cooked once with alcohol. Then that fluid gets concentrated down, all gets put together, gets sent off to a spray dryer, and at the end of the process, you have this really beautiful fine powder.
Yeah.
And that the thing about it too with these mushroom powders is every mushroom species is unique. Everyone's got its own flavor. Everyone has it's a different color. Everyone has a unique benefit, although they all share certain compounds that are beneficial, and those would be the beta-glucans.
Right. So back to because I do want to touch on maybe the top 5 medicinal mushrooms in the Chinese herbal system.
Yeah.
What about a country like China that's very polluted and has, from what I understand, somewhat lax, pollution laws and things like that, in terms of heavy metals and yeast and things like that getting into the mushrooms? There's a lot of fears that people have in the herbal scene. Oh, it comes from China. People really get paranoid that mercury dust has come down from the coal mining or whatever. How does one ensure that there's not any contaminants getting in there prior to even the processing stage?
You know what? People's concerns are definitely well-founded. Any industrial area, be it in China or somewhere else, if it's spewing out all of that into the air and that's going to settle somewhere or into the water, that's a problem. So for one, most of our mushrooms are grown deep in China, back in the mountains, in areas that are really far, not near big cities.
So
they're far away.
In Beijing.
No, or Shanghai or these places. No, not at all. And look, we can't sell our products unless they have been tested for heavy metals, for pesticides, and there are standards for that. So before any of our products leave China, they get tested for pesticides, they get tested for heavy metals, and they get tested for microbial contamination. This is standard procedure in the supplement industry. Once they get over here, we bring them right into our warehouse in California. We sample them. We test them again. And the labs testing them in China are not like in-house labs by the company that's producing them. These are international labs that are very qualified, have the best machinery. They're doing a very good job. But we test them again. We will resample it. We will send it out for the whole battery of tests again. Pesticides, heavy metals, microorganisms. So essentially, all of our products, every single batch that we make is tested twice. And I cannot sell my products unless it meets these specifications, unless it passes these tests. No company will buy it from me. That's the way the industry is right now. A lot of people think, oh, yeah, the industry, it's unregulated and this and that. In some ways it is. But man, when it comes to these types of standards, heavy metals and pesticides and things, it's pretty strict. And people who are out there, businesses, they're very careful. I mean, especially here in California, Prop 65. People have to be very careful about what they're doing. And not only that.
What about, Jeff, what about the irradiation issue? Because I've heard, this is going back when I first got into herbs in the mid-90s, certain purveyors would say, hey, you got to look out when you're bringing something from out of the country. It might even be grown organically there, tested for this, tested for that, but then it gets irradiated. In other words, like run through, a sterilization process on its way in, but can still be called organic. And there's weird stuff like that. Do you know anything about the irradiation practice of certain herbs?
Yeah, certainly for one. And what I would say is generally speaking, nothing is going to get irradiated as it comes into the country. What will happen is sometimes they might put a container under some kind of X-ray, let's say, just to kind of check things. But irradiation, no. And our products are not irradiated and can't be irradiated. I mean, absolutely not. And they're tests now. There are tests that you can do to make sure it's not irradiated.
Oh, that's cool.
The industry now, it's funny, Luke, because 5 years ago, I had a couple of customers, big companies, who were like, we want every single product you sell us to be irradiated.
Oh, God.
And you know why? And this is the whole thing, like spices. Spices are irradiated. They're just irradiated. That's it, because there's a lot of microorganisms that you can't get out. I mean, food, it's got microorganisms there. It's not like clean. And not only that, we don't want to be eating food that is like, there's not a single microbe on that. We need those microbes. That's what keeps us healthy, because that's what keeps our immunity going and strong. We just don't want so many of them that they create illness. Right. So that's really the key.
Sure.
But no, we irradiation, like I was saying, they used to be like, oh no, we need that. Now irradiation in the supplement industry is like verboten. You do not irradiate. If it's irradiated, we're sending it back. We will not accept
things have
this. Have they ever?
Yeah.
Those things have evolved, but as we'll find out as we go along, other things haven't evolved, and that's really the shame in it all. And we'll sort of get
so
there.
let's get into now the different types of mushrooms. Then some of the big players, like we've got our reishi mushroom here, and then again, I'm sorry people listening won't be able to see this, but we've got this bag of cordyceps, which is just a beautiful specimen. Those people that are watching on Instagram and Facebook Live can see this. We've got a bag of this, and I just want to eat the whole damn thing. So run us through the top 4 or 5 mushrooms that you like to work with, and in a brief way, if you can, some of the health benefits attributed to some of those particular strains.
Well, first let me just say that mushrooms are a fantastic food. And what I tell people, before you even think about supplementing, put mushrooms in your diet. Start eating mushrooms. Shiitake mushrooms, fabulous. Eat shiitake mushrooms regularly. I eat shiitake mushrooms a couple times a week. I eat mushrooms 3 or 4 times a week. They are part of my diet. I love mushrooms. Now, you just showed this amazing cordyceps. Cordyceps traditionally has been used for people who have just come out of an illness. They've got this weakness. They're fatigued. Cordyceps, that's what they would prescribe for these people. They have something called neurasthenia, and that is weakness after an illness. Now what a lot of people use cordyceps for is, they just go fatigue. They say, well, wow, as an athlete, maybe that can help me overcome my fatigue a little bit. And science has shown that it does help with oxygen utilization. So cordyceps now is used a lot in athletic products and things like that. But I would say too, is if you're feeling a general weakness and malaise or something like that, cordyceps is definitely something that you might want to look at.
And are cordyceps the ones that are grown on a caterpillar or something like that? Does that have something to do with the bug?
Well, here's the thing.
Can they be grown without that, or is that part of the process?
Well, see, the cordyceps that's the most famous is called the Caterpillar Fungus, and that's the name of it in Chinese. And the Chinese name actually means winter worm, summer grass. And what happens is that caterpillar hibernates in the winter, but what it doesn't realize is that it's got spores of cordyceps on it. So while it's hibernating up in Tibet, the foothills to Tibet, and it's hanging out under the ground in the winter, hibernating, think, oh yeah, this is cool, I'm just going to go to sleep for a while. Those spores germinate, the mycelium gets inside that caterpillar and consumes the whole thing.
Wow.
Consumes it, lock, stock, and barrel. So it's no longer alive. And then when conditions change and now it's summer, it puts up this little small grass-like mushroom, which is similar to this here, this Cordyceps Militares, and that's what people have harvested for centuries. And you literally have to do it on your hands and knees. And not just pick that mushroom. No, they dig back the turf and they pull that caterpillar out. And then they dry the caterpillar with this cordyceps on it. And that's why it's called the Caterpillar Fungus and winter worm, summer grass. And the reason why this is so famous actually is because in China, they consider it to be a aphrodisiac and something that helps with potency.
The worm, I get it. Okay. I can see how there would be a folklore association there.
Well, exactly. That's kind of like sympathetic magic, like produces like kind of thing, like a rhino horn or something.
So with the cordyceps now, are you able to produce it without the worm involved and still get the medicinal benefits?
Well, here's what's happened is that in the last 10 years, in 1999, I was in Hong Kong and I was looking at cordyceps going, okay, yeah, this is cool. I should probably get working my product line. $1,000 a kilogram. I'm thinking, wow, $1,000 a kilogram. I buy some samples, I take it back, and people are like, well, yeah, it's all very interesting, but you know what? Our customers are vegetarians. They don't want to eat caterpillars. That's meat.
Oh, interesting. I never thought of that.
And I'm like, yeah, caterpillars, that's going to be a hard sell. And in the interim period, what has happened is that in the last 10 years, the price of cordyceps, all of a sudden the demand has sort of gone up, especially in Asia, and it went up to the point where it was now, instead of $1,000 a kilo, $20,000 a kilogram.
Oh my God.
Wholesale.
Wow.
Yeah. And sometimes it's like $10 US a gram. It's just like nuts. So what happens now, and here's the really cool thing. This is a different species that was called Cordyceps sinensis. This one is Cordyceps militares. This also grows on a bug in the wild, but in the last 10 years in China, scientists have learned how to cultivate it, and they cultivate it actually on a rice type of material. And now we can, and listen, Luke, there's only maybe 20, 25 mushrooms that we can cultivate in the world. That's it. And there's thousands of species. We can only cultivate about 25. So when a new species comes into cultivation, it is like, wow. It is a wow factor. And for me, not only that, it's cordyceps. For the first time, we can have the cordyceps, the mushroom itself. We can be actually using that and providing that to my customers. And you know what? At a price that is really reasonable. Like, for example, Real Mushrooms, which is the retail side of the business, sells 60 grams. So a tenth of a kilo almost, or a 1/15 of a kilo, sells that for $30.
Wow.
Yeah. And,
Wow.
and the science has shown, and this Cordyceps militares has been used interchangeably with Cordyceps sinensis historically. So it's got all the same properties and more. So it's just a fantastic development, and I'm just
That's
so
awesome.
happy. And the fact that I
I'm
can
happy too, 'cause I
offer
can
that
afford
to
it.
people. Yeah, I know. And it's like, okay. And you know what's funny is that now the price of the wild one is starting to go down.
I bet.
And that's a good thing.
Sure.
It's a good thing. Can you imagine
Sure.
what it would do to a culture if
Yeah.
some wildcrafted product out there all of a sudden was worth $20,000 a kilogram? Can you imagine what that would do to the culture? There literally have been incidents where a group comes into an area that is a different village. They start to harvest the cordyceps. The locals go, "You're in my hood. You can't do this." They've killed them.
Wow.
There was an incident where they killed 6 people.
Damn.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah. It's like you're in my hunting ground. You can't do that. You got to leave. You got to get out of here.
Well, thank God for laboratories.
So you know what? And so this is grown naturally. The reishi, that's grown on a wood log. With mushrooms having, like, for example, most medicinal mushrooms, interestingly enough, except the cordyceps, grow on wood. Wood has a lot of the precursors that we need to make those medicinal compounds. Right. So if you're not growing your mushroom on wood, you're not going to get the precursors. Reishi, you're not going to get the triterpenoids, which are the bitter element of reishi. Reishi is the premier adaptogen. That is what everybody in China knows. They know the reishi mushroom. And that's what people take, especially as they get older, their immune system gets a little bit tired. They start to take reishi, and they just consume that for the rest of their lives. And that's one of their main tonic herbs. That's something that's going to work on all levels for you. So reishi is, if you're going to take one particular mushroom and supplement it with it, reishi, man, that's the one. That's what I put into my coffee every morning.
I remember, I do too. Yeah, I remember going in the early 90s to Chinatown and getting these reishi mushrooms that were sliced up, kind of a cross section, and they look sort of like a pale bacon almost, like a strip of bacon. And I would boil those. I was like, God, these things taste like shit. And then I realized, if you mix it with coffee or a drink that already has a tone of flavor that's inherently bitter in and of itself, it's got that synergistic relationship.
Absolutely.
You can make it taste good.
It tastes very similar, so you can put it in there and it just kind of melds in with what you've already got there.
So with the immune system benefits of reishi, which seem to be the primary ones, are there any other top benefits of that particular mushroom?
Of reishi?
Yeah.
Well, it's also, again, when we're talking about the liver, it's kind of a purifying the liver, so it will help clean your liver. That's another one of the major benefits of reishi. But I think the immunological benefit is really the top. And here's what's really interesting. Immunological benefits are measured by beta-glucans because they're the key component in all medicinal mushrooms that give you that immunological modulation or stimulation, which creates immune cells. Reishi and turkey tail, in all of our testing, and we test for all of our products for beta-glucans, they're the highest in beta-glucan.
Wow.
And I'm sort of like, wow, isn't that interesting? Even scientific testing sort of demonstrates that, look at that. Those two are the highest in the beta-glucans. And I'm just thinking that is really cool. Now, lion's mane is different in terms of, it's been used in China for memory loss. It's been used for dementia. And the interesting thing about lion's mane is that there was a study. You don't get many clinical trials with herbal products. It's expensive. And you do a clinical trial, then all the people that didn't do the clinical trial get to use your data, right? So they did a clinical trial in Japan with lion's mane, and they had 2 groups. They actually had a control group, 30 people each, and the one group got 3 grams a day of lion's mane mushroom powder. The other group, nothing. And they gave them a whole battery of tests. And then at the end of 30 days, they tested them again. The group that was taking the lion's mane did significantly better in the testing. significantly better than the control group.
Wow.
Now, here's the kicker. 30 days later, after stopping the lion's mane, they tested them all again. The group that tested so well with the lion's mane was back down to the normal level.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I know.
Well, that's also interesting because, as we were talking about earlier, that there's speculation, I guess, anecdotal evidence to support the idea that lion's mane would have a synergistic relationship with the psychoactive mushrooms, the psilocybin. So that kind of makes sense, if they're both sort of centered in the brain and mental acuity and sharpness and visual acuity and all of that kind of stuff. That makes sense. Okay, so lion's mane, reishi. What else did we cover?
We covered cordyceps.
Let's talk about chaga mushroom, which is one that I've been using every day for years and years in various forms.
Okay. Well, let me say a couple things about chaga to start it off. First of all, right now chaga is what we call in the industry the flavor of the month. Okay. And if you go out there,
trendy mushroom.
If you go out there on the web, it's like, oh, chaga's the king of mushrooms. Is there anything chaga doesn't do? Nope, it does it all. It's what we call the panacea. Right. Man, Luke, I hate that kind of talk. To me, that's like pure marketing speak. Look, I sell chaga. It's great if you want to buy it, but I'm not going to hype that up like these hypesters out there that are marketing it, and it's all just pure marketing. And so don't believe the hype, everybody. Chaga is a great mushroom, though. It's been used for hundreds of years in Eastern Europe, Russia, as something for stomach problems. That was a big thing for chaga, was stomach problems. And also it was a folk remedy for cancer. So it does have those types of benefits. And chaga is not actually a mushroom, which is really kind of the cool thing. It grows off the side of an infected birch tree. The birch tree's been infected. The mycelium has permeated that tree, and now it produces a canker. And it's just this black, really irregular mass that you're just like, what the hell is that?
Kind of looks like a giant wart on the side, like a black wart on the side of a white birch tree.
Absolutely right.
Right?
Yeah. And so it's a canker. It's not a mushroom. And here's what's really interesting is that when that canker is produced, the mycelium is part of that, but the mycelium is only a small part of that canker. That most of that is woody tissue that has been consumed by the mycelium. It's still there, but the actual amount of mycelium that's still in that canker is low. It might be someone has looked at it under a microscope and found there's about 10% in there. But the chaga, there's been great research that was done on chaga in Finland because that's where they have a lot of birch. Finland, northern Russia there, a lot of chaga. They've been using it for a long time. So I would say with chaga, more than anything else, I would say if you've got any kind of stomach type problems, use chaga. And a lot of people would talk about all sorts of these other things. It's like, please go away and let's just deal with the real things. It's just like with mushrooms in general. I like to think there's 4 or 5 things that they do really well. And look, I understand scientists have taken all these mushrooms. They've fractionated them down into the smallest of compounds. They've tested them. They found they have all sorts of antiviral, antifungal, even some benefits against the AIDS virus. But look, you're not going to get those kind of things from taking one of these supplements because they're doing it they're taking small amounts of a pure compound and testing it. So a lot of times companies will take that results from that and go, oh, mushrooms will cure AIDS. It's like, oh shit, here we go again. No. Let's not go there. Yes, there's a lot of possibilities there, but it's not going to happen by taking a couple of grams of a supplement or just eating mushrooms. They have taken turkey tail, for example, in Japan and China, and they've manufactured a product. One's called PSK, one's called PSP. And this product they use in cancer therapy, but not alone. They basically use it in conjunction with people that are going through chemo or radiation or something like that. And the whole idea is if it can help these people immunologically, then it's got a benefit there. And they show a certain amount of benefit, not complete, and maybe it might give you a couple of extra years or something, but it's not a panacea. It's not going to cure your cancer. Please, whatever you do, don't think you've got a cancer cure here. It's not, right? Now, I'm not saying that some people, things happen.
Yeah.
Some people could be taking one of these folk remedies and maybe they get a miracle cure. Maybe they get really amazing benefits. That's always possible, but I'm just saying, please don't build it up beyond what it really is.
I appreciate that approach, especially someone who makes their living selling mushrooms. I think it shows a degree of integrity on your part, because it would be in your financial best interest to say, to exaggerate the benefit of mushroom use. I have a couple of weird and / specific questions for chaga in particular. One is, I've heard, around the interweb, and a lot of this stuff is conjecture and rumor, so you don't really know, is that chaga, and it sort of relates to the cancer and chemotherapy thing, is that chaga inherently can absorb radiation, or tends to attract and absorb radiation, so that you don't want to use chaga, for example, from the Pacific Northwest or something like that, because it might have caught wind of the Fukushima radiation. You want to get it only from Siberia. Have you heard anything about chaga containing radiation?
Well, you know what? First of all, when you look back at Chernobyl and you look at the radiation cloud that came out of Chernobyl, and landing in all of these areas in Ukraine and north, and contaminated a lot of the soils and stuff, well, certainly mushrooms were some of the organisms that did pick up some of that radiation. So in a lot of those zones, it was like, do not pick mushrooms in those zones and things.
Okay.
Now here's what's kind of interesting is, like, back about when Fukushima went off, one of my customers in Hong Kong said to me, okay, Jeff, I want you to test all of our products because I'm a little bit afraid. I want you to test it for radiation. I bought a Geiger counter.
Oh, cool.
I got a Geiger counter. It's a professional Geiger counter.
How much are those for like a legit one?
This one was $700.
Wow.
Made in California. It's a cool little unit. So I can test things for radiation.
I remember when after Fukushima, there were people going out on the coast in San Francisco by the Golden Gate Bridge and in LA and holding that up on the beach and detecting radiation. I mean, it was pretty compelling. It made me not want to go jump in the ocean for a while after Fukushima, but I don't know. You don't really know.
We tested all the chaga that I've got, and I've got a lot of chaga from Russia and stuff, and there there was not a single beep
perfect.
at all.
All right, so
so I would say, and then, there's another meme going out there that chaga is threatened.
That's the next thing I was going to get to.
And that you shouldn't wildcraft it. Instead, you should buy our other products that are not wildcrafted. Again, it's one of those types of things. Chaga is not threatened. Oh, my Lord. The birch forests out there are vast. You know where chaga gets harvested? Along the logging roads. You got a ladder, you got an axe. You're like, how deep in that forest are you going to go?
Interesting.
Not very deep. In fact, what they say is in north of Russia, where they've been harvesting chaga for quite a while, people now have to go a little bit deeper into the forest to get the chaga, right? But the chaga forests in Siberia, the chaga forests in Canada. I had a conversation with United Plant Savers. That's their business. They look out there, what's threatened and what's not. I had a conversation. I was told, you know what? This woman called me and she said, in the forest that around her, people are out there harvesting this chaga, and they're going to take them all. Yes, okay, there's some small forest in some suburban area where people are harvesting chaga. And I'm like, hold on a minute. You're getting these anecdotal information. There was a study done in 2004 at, this person was at Oregon State University, went off to Siberia, interviewed people all over the place, and interviewed people in the United States. Ultimately said, you know what? It is not even close to anywhere near the possibility that there's a problem with overharvest of chaga. And there isn't. Let me tell you, they're absolutely not.
I'm glad to hear that, because that's the sense that I got. I mean, it's almost like, the scarcity of water and the scarcity of crude oil and these things. I'm a big spring water harvester. You go up to the headwaters of the Sacramento River in Mount Shasta, There's no shortage of goddamn water. I mean, it's like there's springs all over the world that have been producing for at least hundreds, if not thousands of years. And then I discovered recently something called primary water, which is now scientifically validated, and that's water that's never actually been on the surface of the planet. The planet actually makes water.
And
then we're realizing that all of this business about fossil fuels being made by decayed dinosaurs is total bullshit. There's plenty of oil in the world. I mean, not to say that, I'm all for alternative sources of
absolutely.
less pollution. I love the planet and all that, but I'm just saying there is a lot of greenwashing going on, and a lot of
you have to be very careful with the information.
A lot of propaganda.
Yes.
Because people have good intentions, I think, in some things. And, like I said, if I have a birch forest down the road for me and a bunch of hippies are going and harvesting chaga, I'm going to feel like, from my perspective, that the world is under chaga threat and these poor birch trees. But really, if you fly over some areas of Canada or Siberia, you're going to see thousands of square miles of birch forest that are no human being's ever going to get chaga.
Well, not only that, in every forest, they've figured that about 20% of the trees are infected with chaga. Here's what happens too. You take that canker off, it grows back in that same place.
That was my next question.
It grows back.
I was going to ask, does it kill the tree if you take that?
No, the tree is actually dead standing.
Okay.
The tree is dead standing.
Because it's already infected.
Well, think about it. I mean, it's like you've got something that's infected and it's got this manifestation and you yank that off. Okay, you might even be doing it a favor, but the fact is that tree has that mycelium that's permeating the tree. The chaga is just a manifestation of that infection.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
That tree is going to, at some point, that wood will get so weak at a certain point, the tree will collapse or it will break in two. But that's what will happen to it. And this is just, even in the forest where I live, we have trees on my property. I live in an old growth forest. I have trees that actually occasionally will just collapse. And I go out there and look at them and I go, oh, that's been, it's like the inside is punk from the fungus that has basically been consuming it.
Right.
That's just, that's nature.
It's kind of nature. In order for one thing to live, another thing has to die.
It's just part of how it all works. I mean, Luke, everything is consuming everything.
It is.
Everything is consuming. And when I'm finished, I'm just going to be consumed by something, right?
Yeah.
That's just how it works.
So the last thing I want to touch on here, because I feel like this is, this is the encyclopedia of all things mushroom here. I'm very proud of this episode and what we've been able to deliver to people so far. There's one thing I do want to cover, and that is the extraction methods of consuming medicinal mushrooms. Yeah. So as I understand, some of them are extracted with alcohol. Some of them are extracted with hot water, and that would be a dual extraction if you do both.
Yep.
And then some mushrooms, it seems, might just be ground up and you just eat them. So run me through some of the basics of, say, reishi, chaga, lion's mane, cordyceps. We didn't really get too much into turkey tail, but what are some of the extraction methods? Like, could I take this bag of cordyceps, grind it up and eat it, or does it need to be extracted with water or alcohol?
Oh, no, you know what? I mean, think about extraction is okay. It's like a tea. You could get the benefits from that tea if you ground it up to a powder and consumed it. You could be getting the benefits of those herbs, just like you could be getting the benefits of those mushrooms if you just ground them up and ate them. Tea is just a great delivery system. Fast acting. Extraction is a great delivery system too, because it can in a sense pre-digest those herbal materials for you. Instead of having to let your body do it, you can have them pre-digested. And the other thing about extraction is oftentimes if you're just taking a couple grams of ground up herb, there's not enough of the actives in there to help you. So extractions oftentimes will concentrate. For example, let's take 10 kilos of dried herb and we turn it into 1 kilo of herbal extract. And listen, when my company does that, and with most extraction companies do it, not all, what you're trying to do is you're trying to come up with an extract that has a similar profile to the actual herb. It's concentrated, so you don't have to take 100 grams of it. You can just take a couple grams of it, because now you've got a lot more of the active compounds in that smaller amount. So that's really a lot of the reason why we have extracts. In China, they use a lot of just water extracts because they've got a whole bunch of different herbs, and here's your medicine. And so you throw them in a pot and you boil them up like crazy.
When I first started going to Chinese medicine doctors, they look at your tongue, go, oh, okay, I know what you need. And then they'd walk away with a little brown paper bag of schizandra berries and, sliced reishi and all this stuff.
They put all sorts of things in there, right?
It's fun. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it
feels very like ancient folk medicine kind of practice.
Absolutely
so in that sense, you're going home and doing your own kind of primitive extraction.
Well, it's not even primitive. I mean, a tea or a soup. A soup is an extraction, right? I mean, you're putting something in there. You're pulling out the water-soluble compounds, and you're drinking them. And a lot of the compounds that are not water-soluble, well, oil is not water-soluble, but that doesn't mean you're not going to get the oil if you leave it in your soup, right? And what happens with certain mushrooms like reishi and chaga is they have some compounds that are not water soluble. The water will pull out a lot of the triterpenes and it will pull a lot of them out. But there's still some of those that we need alcohol to get everything out of it. So that's where we'll use alcohol. Most mushrooms don't need a dual extraction. You don't need alcohol for a shiitake or a maitake or something like that. That is absolutely unnecessary. Most of our products we have two lines. One is just a straight water extract that keeps the mushroom powder with the product. So we cook it once at, say, around 170 degrees Fahrenheit. We'll cook it once for 3 hours. It's powder. We'll concentrate the fluid down. Then we'll send that fluid, that kind of syrupy fluid, and the powder to a spray dryer. Dries it out. 1 kilo of dry mushroom in, 1 kilo of powder out. Our more concentrated products might be 8 kilos and 1 out. And in that case, we will either water extract it 3 times or we'll water extract it twice and then once with alcohol. And because we're concentrating it down, we can't keep 8 kilos of fiber with that. So the fiber at this point, we figure that fiber is pretty much spent. And so everything gets filtered out, and then we just have the pure extract at that point. So those are our two major products.
And is this where you see, like, because I always read the labels of everything that I'm going to ingest or anything, God forbid, I put on my website. Is this where you see, like, a 10-to-1 extraction? It'll be like 10:1.
Yes, that's what that means. And remember, believe it or not, some companies will actually say 10-to-1, and they'll be saying 10 kilos of wet mushroom.
Sneaky bastard.
Sneaky, see? So that's something you have to be aware of too.
Right.
Because, those ratios are defined as dry to dry.
Right.
So some very sneaky companies will use wet to dry, and if it's 90% water, actually what that is, it's not a 10-to-1, it's just a 1-to-1.
Right.
And who knows? I mean, the other thing with a lot of extraction companies is they will put a carrier with it. And the carrier is something like maltodextrin or dextrin. It's a starch of some sort, and that can be up to 50% of the product. I've seen some products where the carrier material was 80% of the product.
So, like, the extract goes into a powder. That would be the carriers, like maltodextrin is a powder.
That's right. That's
kind of like a starchy powder.
That's right.
Now you actually have something that can be encapsulated or put into a jar.
And even without that starch, you see, like with our products, we don't use carriers at all. And so that will come out. It'll be a fine powder, and that fine powder will get put into capsules, bottles, and so on.
So with your higher concentration extractions, then essentially that's the spray dry of the extraction, then that's turned into a powder.
Correct. That's right. That's right. That fluid is going out. It's sprayed into this big cyclone, which is very hot, and it just falls to the bottom. Right. But even our 1-to-1 extracts, the same thing. Even with the mushroom powder and that fluid, when it goes up there, basically that fluid is evaporating and that powder's falling down, but you're getting that now has been pre-digested.
Right.
So that's really the difference between the two.
Which is necessary, because if you're looking at this reishi mushroom in front of us, I mean, I like to see anyone try and chew on that thing. It's like hardwood. I mean, you're not going to get, and chaga, I mean,
that's right.
It's a funny thing, and I want to see what your take is on this. I have seen some companies, and God bless them, I'm sure they think they're doing the right thing. Maybe they are, but I'll see like a chaga powder that's like a ground up powder, and I've even taken my chaga chunks that I buy, off eBay or Etsy, I find a buyer that I trust where it's not going to be moldy and stuff like that. Yeah. And I'll buy it just 5 pounds at a time, and I'll put them in my Vitamix I'm sorry, not my Vitamix. I tried that. That didn't work. Don't do that.
Don't do that. It'll break your Vitamix.
Don't do that. But I'll break them up a little bit, with a hammer. I put them in a rag and I hit them with a hammer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, on a piece of concrete. Okay, then I put those in a coffee grinder and I'll make myself like a chaga powder, and then I'll boil that.
Yes.
And I get a really dark extraction a lot faster. But what I see is some companies are encapsulating chaga, just ground up chaga mushroom, and I feel like that's like eating ground up sponge. Like, is my body going to be able to do the extraction itself and get the medicinal compounds out of that?
Well, you know what? That's what I call lowest common denominator.
Okay.
And you're not going to get a lot of benefits out of that because you're not going to be eating enough of it to make a real difference.
If you're taking 4 little ground up chaga capsules versus me taking a pound of chaga in my crock pot, I'm getting like a black tar tea out of it almost.
You're doing it the right way, because what you're doing is you're making one nice big batch, and you're taking that dark fluid and you're going, okay, I've got 5 kilos in here and I've got, 4 liters or a gallon or something. And so you can kind of measure the doses. You stick it in your fridge. Every so often you pull it out, you pour it in, you know how much to take, and there you are. You got that nice, powerful extract in you're taking. And that's a fantastic way to do it, because you don't want to have to be boiling it up every time you want it, right?
Yeah.
No, that's the way to do it.
It's a long boil time too with the chaga. So I put it in a crock pot, I boil it, put it in a big giant glass dispenser with like a spout on the bottom, and I keep that in the fridge all the time. And then I freeze the chunks from that extraction. Yeah. I put them in a Ziploc bag, put them in the freezer. Next time I'm going to make chaga tea, I reuse those, and I'll probably reuse them, 5 to 10 times and still get a really dark chaga tea out of it.
Well, and I think you and I talked about that a little bit.
And I cut them into smaller pieces when they're wet, too, to get more surface exposed.
Exactly, and that's what you do with the reishi. The same thing.
Right.
The first time you do it, really with a reishi mushroom, you almost have to take a hatchet to break it into pieces. Or a saw,
right.
Like I've actually seen a table saw where we're just like, zzz.
Well, that's the thing. I've only ever made a tea like extraction myself with reishi after it's already sliced up.
Yeah, well,
those little bacon-looking pieces.
And so after the first extraction, it's gotten like a lot softer. Then you can take a knife and you go boom, 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 boom. So you can keep chopping it finer as you go along. But I think the thing too is if you want to do it all at once, what you do is you boil it up for a number of hours, you pour it off, add more water. You can do that until, like you're saying, until the water doesn't turn anymore.
Right.
Okay. And then you know it's pretty much
got all the medicine
spent.
out.
It's done. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. In closing, and I want to leave on a negative note, but I've also noticed there are some companies producing mushrooms or selling mushrooms where I don't taste a lot of the medicine, like some reishi products that I've had some that are like yours that, you put a teaspoon of that extract in your mouth, it's like, wow. Or if you put a teaspoon in a glass of water, it's really, really bitter. The water is going to become dark. But I've seen some that has this like a bunch of mycelium or starch. There doesn't really appear to be any actual mushroom left in there. And, I know you're a polite guy. You don't seem like one that's going to put everyone else down to sell your own stuff. But what are some things people could look out for in terms of just inferior mushroom products and how to tell the difference?
Well, I talked about this earlier a bit when I was talking about going to China and getting my mushrooms produced over there. What happens is because they're so expensive to produce, companies in the United States will actually grow out the mycelium on sterilized grain. So they'll actually take grain, they'll put it in a plastic bag, they'll sterilize it, they'll inoculate it with mycelium, and then they'll incubate it in a laboratory for 30 to 60 days. And when the grain is fully covered with mycelium, then they'll take that out, they'll dry it, they'll grind it to a powder, and they'll sell it as a mushroom. And the fact is that they don't take the grain out of it. So most of the product ends up being starch from all of the grain in that product. And the thing that's so difficult about this for the consumer is that when they sell it, you look at the label and it says reishi mushroom, and it's got a picture of a reishi mushroom. And some of these products actually have a little circle that says made with 100% organic mushrooms. There's no mushrooms in it at all. And that's the thing, is they do not actually grow mushrooms. They just grow the mycelium. They grow it on sterilized grain. Some companies will tell you when you turn it over after you've thought you bought a mushroom product and you turn it over and the supplements fact says mycelium, and you go, oh yeah, okay. And then you go down to the fine print where it says other. Some companies will actually say myceliated grain. They might say oats. That's the tell. That's where you know that what you've actually got is not a mushroom product at all. And let me tell you, Luke, we're here at Paleo FX. We've got people here that are totally into paleo and no grains and all of that. And they come up to me and they say, oh, yeah, I'm taking this great mushroom product.
And you're like, you're eating a bunch of rice every day.
Hey, listen, I talked to somebody like that this morning. And I said, oh, yeah, so who makes it? And he told me the company. And this company right now is pretty popular. And I said, well, man, I hate to tell you this, but see that over there? See that bag of grain with the mycelium? That's what you're taking. It's mostly grain powder. And he's like, man, he was just like I just kind of blew his mind. I said, how does it taste? Does it taste really mushroomy? He said, well, it tastes kind of bland. It's got kind of a light color. I said, look, try some of our actual mushroom powders here.
They don't taste bland. The real thing is anything but bland.
No, it's not bland. And I was telling you that some of these companies actually say, our mushroom products go with everything. They don't even taste like mushroom. And I'm like, oh, Jesus, why are you saying that? They don't taste like mushroom. Well, if it doesn't taste like mushroom, that's a red flag right away.
Yeah.
And if it's bland, there's so many reishi products out there that are this myceliated grain. And I tell people, do you know what tempeh is?
Yeah.
Tempeh is actually a fungus that is grown on cooked soybeans. That's the exact same process that these people are using. They're growing a fungus on cooked grain. And tempeh is a food. You look at it and it's white with mycelium, and you open it up and you see all the soybeans in there. Man, if you dried that out, let me tell you, what you would see is a little bit of white stuff and mostly soybeans. And that's the same with these products. It's mostly grain powder. You're being fooled. I hate to tell you that, everybody. Please, please, please look at the label really closely. Taste the product if you've already bought it. And here's the other wonderful test I have for people. It's called the Iodine Starch test. And we actually sell little test kits, but you can just go to the pharmacy and you can get a little bottle of iodine. Take it home. Take that so-called mushroom product, empty out a couple capsules into maybe a quarter cup of water. Stir it, let it get in there a bit, stir it up good. Put 10 drops of iodine in there. If there's starch, that will turn black. Absolutely black. A mushroom has no starch. Take one of our products. Now reishi, we've got a reishi product that's already dark, so that doesn't work so well. But our other products are not dark like that. Put our products, or you got dried shiitake at home. Throw it in a grinder, put it into the water, stir it up, drop the iodine in. All you'll see is the iodine color. There's no reaction because mushrooms do not have starch.
Interesting.
And these other products are up to 60 to 70% starch. And what happens is we want beta-glucans. These products have, on average, through our testing, about 5 or 6% beta-glucan.
Oh, bummer.
Yeah, it is just crazy. You're getting the exact opposite. Mushrooms are as much as 60% beta-glucan. So, think about that for a second. You've got products that rather than having a lot of beta-glucan, they have hardly any beta-glucan. Instead, they have all sorts of starch. Mushroom has no starch. So it's the absolute opposite.
Right. It's the opposite of what you're trying to actually achieve.
That's exactly right. And I feel really bad for people, especially people with life-threatening illnesses that are looking to a mushroom product, maybe to help them with immune issues or something like that. And they bought this and they've listened to somebody out there who said how wonderful their product is, and they believe these people. And then they buy this product, they're taking it, and you know what? It's just nothing but grain powder.
Well, on that note, as I said, I don't want to end on a negative note, but there is a silver lining. Now we have a way to test. We know what to look for. We can go with a company like yours or any other that is doing it right. And one of the main things that I like to do on the show is do a bit of myth busting and help people not to waste their time and money with practices or products that actually don't work, because time is a finite resource, time, at least in this lifetime. Yeah. So it's like, I'm always about doing the best of the best of the best until I find something better. And that's kind of the purpose.
Well, and people want to get the benefits from mushroom. And what I'm trying to do is to educate people of that. I'm not saying come and buy my products. Look, buy your mushroom product wherever you want, but at least be educated to where you know what you're getting. Sure. And that's where we've got a bit of what I would call a bait and switch going on. And it's really sad. I feel very sorry. And a lot of companies in the nutritional supplement industry are good companies. There's just a lot of products out there that are not.
Yeah. Well, now this week, when this comes out, at least within the first week or so, about 20,000 people are going to hear this message. So that's
awesome. And
20,000 people that are wiser.
Spread the message.
On that note, I got two closing questions. One of the three-parter. So you've taught me, I think, everything I could ever want to know about mushrooms today, as you have our audience. Who have been three teachers or teachings in any area of your life that you might recommend our audience go check out to learn more about anything meaningful?
Wow, that's really a good question. Let me think here, because there's been so many teachers. Let's see. Well, I guess in the beginning, I listened to and read a lot from people like Ram Dass. Ram Dass is an amazing teacher. And his message of peace and love totally resonates.
Awesome.
So absolutely Ram Dass. He's one of them. Another one that I highly recommend to people that I love as somebody who was opening up new worlds was certainly Terence Mckenna. He was really, really good. He's somebody I recommend to people that they listen to. And it's funny because I could say my father, and interestingly enough, he taught me a lot of what not to do in my life. So that was a very great teaching too.
That's awesome. That's the first time I've heard it contextualized in that way. Usually it's like, oh, my grandfather was my hero and he was such a great man that I looked after him. But yeah,
I love my father very much. He was a flawed individual in a number of ways. And he taught me how not to raise my children.
That's awesome. That's what I call the boomerang effect.
Yeah.
It's like when you see a model of how to not do something effectively or with love, then you learn the opposite of that. So that's a really great example.
And again, I love my father very dearly. He had, like I say, there was things about him, and he was one of these guys that loved business, and he was always totally into his business things and way more than he should have been.
Yeah.
And that also taught me about business, and my whole business is like, don't get so caught up in this, and making money is not what I'm here for. I could care less. I've always said, if you do what you're passionate about, it will come.
Yeah.
Just follow your passion.
I love hearing that, because that's what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
This is my passion. And,
a
little bit of money starting to trickle in here and there.
Well, it'll come.
But it wasn't why I did it.
Yeah, no, that's right.
I did it because I literally can't not talk to people like you and share your message with the world. It's just, I find things, I'm like, everyone's got to know this. This is a game changer. So thank you for that. And where
welcome.
Can people find you? Website, social media, any links you want to share with our audience?
Well, you can find us at nammex.com, Nammex.com, Nammex.com. I've got a lot of information on the website. I've got great slideshows there where you can see all the mushrooms we grow and stuff like that. And then you can get the products off the internet. We're a wholesaler primarily, but you can get the retail products at realmushrooms.com.
Awesome. Or if someone was producing products and they want to buy bulk, they could get them from you guys too on the wholesale side.
Absolutely. Cool. Yeah, that's primarily what the business is all about. But we do offer the products so people can get them the straight stuff, nothing, no blends, no this, no that, just the straight stuff. They can get them from realmushrooms.com.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much. I'm glad we've been talking about this for a while. I'm glad we finally took the time to do it.
Yeah, it's been really fun.
I'm hoping our sound came out okay. As I said in the beginning of the show, guys, we're literally sitting out in the middle of downtown Austin. So, you have to forgive us if there was a little bit of noise. But I'll tell you what, it was nice to be out here with you today and such a lovely setting. So thanks for your time.
Thank you, Luke. Pleasure.
It. I'm going to go out on a limb here, you guys, and guess that right about now you were dying to put some sort of mushroom into your body, right? When I sat down and did this interview, I immediately went inside, went up to the Real Mushroom booth, which is Jeff's company. And by the way, of course we talked about that in the interview, but it's not one of my ads, so I didn't plug it. But Real Mushrooms are legit, dude. I'm just going to come right out and say that. I don't think I have them in my store yet, but God damn it, I should. Real Mushrooms are great because they are extracts. That's Jeff's company, just to recap. They're bulk herbs, you know what I'm saying? So they come in a huge pouch and you can just macro dose the reishi, the cordyceps, the lion's mane. They're super, super legit. I don't talk about them that much, but I use them all the time in my smoothies and stuff. They're a little different than something like a Four Sigmatic, which of course I love and has been a long-time sponsor of the show. But Four Sigmatic mushrooms come in little packets and they have other ingredients and they taste really good. So you get the benefits of the mushrooms, but they're a lower dose and they're single serving. So I love both. They just have a different purpose. It's awkward to talk about theoretically competitive companies, but they're really not because they do something totally different. So Real Mushrooms is hardcore. So definitely check them out. These guys have a lot of integrity and I use their stuff all the time. I just unfortunately run out of it too fast. That's the problem when I get products that come in a pouch is I'll have literally tablespoons of it when a dose is half a teaspoon. Once an addict, always an addict, I guess. I'm working on it, you guys. I just love goddamn mushrooms. So check that out. Real Mushrooms. I think they're realmushrooms.com. And Jeff talked about it in the thing. So there you go. I'd like to thank our official sponsors, though. Of course, Four Sigmatic. You know one thing I really like at Four Sigmatic, actually? Of course, all their mushrooms. I mean, when I tell you guys I use them every day, like, I wish I had a hidden camera in my place so you could see I'm not bullshitting you, but I literally put the little Four Sigmatic mushroom things in my coffee every day. But I gotta say, one of my favorite products that Four Sigmatic makes is their dehydrated coffee packets that are infused with mushrooms. That's what I use when I travel for coffee, when I want to make a bomb-ass, really fast iced coffee, or just when I'm in a hurry. Sometimes I don't have time to grind my beans, do the French press, the whole thing, and make my bulletproof coffee. So I'll use some Onnit MCT oil. It's like their creamer, and Onnit's one of our sponsors too. I'm getting to that. But I'll use the Onnit creamer in my Vitamix with maybe 2 packets of the Four Sigmatic mushroom coffee. It's like a dehydrated coffee, instant coffee, right? And then I'll blend that up, and then I'll pour that over ice. Dude, you want to talk about a bomb-ass, bulletproof coffee style coffee? Because it's got that MCT oil from Onnit. I like the vanilla flavor. They also have a coconut flavor, a cinnamon flavor, and what's the other one? Almond, like an amaretto one. I'm not that into the amaretto because I don't like that strong almond flavor. I like the coconut one and the vanilla one a lot. Those are my 2 favorites, just personal preference. But that's really, really badass. So if you want to check out Four Sigmatic, go to foursigmatic.com/Luke Story. Enter the code Luke Story at checkout and save 15%. It's a bomb-ass discount. Speaking of Onnit, I love these guys, man. Really becoming tight with the old crew over at Onnit. And after someone who spent a lot of money at their website for a number of years, it's cool to actually get to know Aubrey and Kyle and the guys over there. And I've got John Wolf coming up, who's one of their big trainers over there. He's on the show coming up. So that'll be 3 Onnit people on the show. Just really solid people, solid company. You can go to onnit.com/Luke and save 10% off using the code Luke. And like I said, there's a zillion things over at Onnit. I would get Alpha Brain. That's a good one. Try their MCT oils, the one I was talking about. They have the flavored, kind of coffee creamer ones, and then they just have straight up MCT, which is badass. And then we've got Athletic Greens. Go to athleticgreens.com/Luke. This is another one of my favorites for travel. They come in these little travel packets, and if you hit them up, you're going to get 20 of those travel packets for free with your first purchase. So athleticgreens.com/Luke. I like these products that come in little packets because they're really great to just throw in the car for road trips and taking on the airplane. I mean, I've made 4 Sigmatic coffee on the airplane. Just put it in my water bottle and shake it up, and I have like a non-toxic Super Bomb coffee. Same with the green powders from Athletic Greens that come in little packets. Really good stuff. My sponsors are awesome. Love them all so much. I love you so much. Thank you for supporting the show. Check this out on Tuesday. Oh boy, we've got a bomb episode coming at you. Wabi Sabi Wellness, the Japanese art of perfectly imperfect living with Candace Kumar. She's super funny, super real, beautiful, amazing woman. Came over and hung out for a couple hours. She made me cookies, woman after my own heart. And she's episode 159. We're getting up there, man. I'm creeping up on 200 episodes. So make sure you subscribe to the show so you don't miss Tuesday's episode. Last thing I want to tell you is I have a store on my site. A lot of people don't realize that. I can tell because I get so many direct messages and emails to my website saying like, hey, what's the best this? What's the best that? What do you recommend for EMF protection? What do you recommend to keep your room cool? The best friggin' mushrooms, this, that, whatever it happens to be. I'm kind of a fanatic for biohacking technology and herbalism and all this stuff. And I'm like, everything at lukestory.com/store is my favorite stuff. That's why I made a store, so that I could save myself time and not type out a million emails a day recommending the favorite things that I find in the world. So at lukestory.com/store, you'll find a beautiful, completely laid out web store with different categories. So there's one for sleep, there's one for outdoors, there's one for EMF protection, blue light protection, nootropics, smart drugs. Everything is categorized so that you can find what you're looking for based on which area of your life you wish to optimize. It's also a great way to support the podcast because some of the brands there give me a commission if I make a sale through the link on my website. It's also great for you because not only do you save time and research, but you also save money on a lot of the things in my store. They have discount codes just like our sponsors do when I run the ads on my show. So that's how that works. lukestory.com/store. Do yourself a favor, get over there, check it out. I've worked really hard for 22 years to find the best things in the world for your health and well-being, and they're all at my store. All right, you guys, I'll see some of you tomorrow night at Next Health, August 22nd. I'll see the rest of you at OsteoStrong the night after, August 23rd. You guys be well. Peace out. This episode of the Lifestylist Podcast was produced by podcastmasters.net.